When I first started tracking my food and looking at my calorie intake, I was surprised, and most of the clients that I work with that start with tracking are in the same boat. So I thought I was eating a diet high in protein. Well, when I was tracking my food for the first few weeks, I realized, okay, I'm nowhere near the numbers I thought that I was. I thought 1 or 2 eggs in my lunch, that's enough protein for that meal.
Awekenge, this is Mental Mythos, hosted by Asekho Toto.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mental Mythos. I'm your host, Asekho Toto. And before we dive into today's incredible conversation, I have a small favor to ask. If you enjoy what you hear today, please take a moment to rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but also helps others discover the valuable insights we share every week. And if you find today's episode particularly inspiring or insightful, don't forget to share it with your friends, family, or anyone you think could benefit from it. Thank you for your support. It truly means the world to us. Now, let's get back into our conversation.
Firstly, can you walk us through when you actually struggled in terms of finding the right diet for you, and what actually interested you in terms of following a diet? Because definitely you don't come across a diet in a younger age of saying that when I grow up or when I follow this certain diet. Definitely it comes through influences, people actually educating us to these things. So what actually, can you walk us through that?
Definitely. So yes, I mean, that's a great question. I think growing up, I just saw the unhealthy relationship my parents also had with food, in the sense of my mom would do some extremer diets where she would just eat some sort of cabbage soup for a few weeks and lose a bunch of weight and then eat way too much again. And so for me, the only way of thinking like, okay, how can I lose weight? Because after high school, I started traveling and I gained a bunch of weight, and I thought, okay, how can I lose this weight? So I just started eating less. And I had already, fortunately, started university in exercise science. And part of that was also a nutrition major. And my first professor, she was very much of a fan of low-fat diets. So I thought, okay, I'll try that. And from that, my next professor, she was a fan of low-carb diets. So I tried that. And eventually, I was just so confused, trying all these different things. After that, I tried paleo, I tried keto, I tried all these things, and everything just left me feeling super restricted and feeling like this cannot be it. I want to enjoy my life. I want to also be able to be social, to eat out, to travel, and still I would like to have, a body that I'm proud of. And thankfully, at some point, I stumbled upon an article, and that article was actually titled How Donuts Gave Me Abs and a 90 kg Snatch. And the snatch, for those of you that don't know, is a very complex Olympic lift. So it's essentially a performance measure. And I was like, whoa, I want that. I want a six pack. I want to eat donuts, and I want to be, strong. And so I read the article, and in this article, the athlete, she said, essentially, it doesn't matter what you eat, as long as your calories are, either in calorie balance, in a calorie surplus, or in a calorie deficit. And as long as you eat the right amount of proteins and, still most of the time, nutritious things. And so I thought, really? Is she telling me I can also have a bit of bread? I can also have a bit of cereal from time to time without feeling guilty? And so I gave this method a try. I calculated my calories, I calculated what protein intake I should have, and I gave it a try, and I lost weight. I lost body fat. I got stronger. I got more defined, and I was like, whoa, this is magic. I feel like I can, also have some piece of cake from time to time, and I really don't have to feel guilty for it. And so with that, my spark was inflamed in wanting to teach others wanting to teach everybody that you don't have to beat yourself up about clean eating or various diets. And essentially, it comes down to quantity, and you can technically eat anything that you want. So since then, I have been on a pursuit of teaching people worldwide that how much they should be eating, so what their calorie target should be in order for them to lose weight or gain muscle or maintain their weight and just recomposition. And just on a mission to show people that we can have food freedom, we can eat out, we can have even a glass of wine here and there if we choose to. And at the same time, we just need to learn to balance that with healthy nutrition most of the time that's not so dense in calories. So that's kind of my path.
Mm-hmm. And losing weight has become a trend nowadays, and everyone wants to lose weight. And the first thought of a person that actually wants to lose weight want to get rid of that belly, and they don't want that big belly, and they want that six pack, that six abs. And people have this thing of not wanting to do things, hard things, because it's something that I also myself saw myself doing. Of like, I need to lose weight. Well, actually, I need to exercise. Why? How? Why can I not just lose the belly? So why? Whilst I am working and realize that it has a tremendous effect when it comes to going to the gym and eating. And definitely, in all honesty, I've seen these diets. I knew about these diets, but yeah, didn't care about them when before I started this podcast. Actually, not before. From last year and going backwards, diet is something that I knew but didn't take look at it in a serious manner. So this year. I started actually talking more about it on this podcast and realized, oh, flip, this thing is important. And as much as we can speak about nutrition, made of fitness, and realize that it has a huge amount of, I would say, effect when it comes to mental health. So you are someone that actually studied for this. You have an MSc in exercise science, health promotion, and nutrition. So, sorry. Definitely, it's a hard thing to actually. Sometimes it becomes so hard to actually choose these things when it comes to college, to your career. So, what actually made you make sure that this is my thing, and along the way, along the road, that you'll not regret in terms of pursuing it?
That's a great question. So I also growing up, I was someone who just loved playing sports or doing different things. I tried volleyball and basketball and track and field, and I thought, oh, this is so much fun. And actually, I mean, to my benefit, I guess at the time I didn't really know what I wanted to be, but what I knew for sure was I wanted to do something that I enjoy. I saw so many people around me, I would say 95% of the people around me who would hate their jobs. They would just come home from work and be annoyed and just I just thought this is over a third of your day, probably like half of your day actually for most people that you're spending your time with and you actually hate it. So I just knew I'm fascinated by the human physiology, by the human body, and I want to learn more about it. I didn't necessarily think, oh, I want to be a personal trainer or oh, I want to be a PE teacher. So I completed my studies, and actually at the end of my studies, I was sort of like lost because, yeah, most people would go into personal training, and then I thought, I don't feel like I have enough experience to be a personal trainer quite yet. Some other people would become sports teachers or PE teachers, and that never really fascinated me. So I actually, for a brief moment in time, I went more into the rehabilitation side of things. So when people had an injury, first of all, you go to the doctor, then you go to the physio, and after that, often you go to a sports therapist. So I thought about being a sports therapist, and then I realized that I do want to work with people in a way where it's more preventative rather than once an injury or accident has already happened. So I want to work with people that are more motivated now while they're still healthy, and not once they've already had their third lower back something from just sitting all their lives. And so that's when I decided I wanted to do online personal training, as well as in-person personal training. And quickly I realized that with just the training aspect, we really don't get that far. We really do need also at the same time to address nutrition. So at that point in time, I added some more of nutrition certifications. And at that point in time, I started my master's degree, because before that I had only had my bachelor's. And then I realized that nutrition really was the even bigger vehicle for me. So nowadays, it is the main thing that I'm focusing on with all my clients. 70% of our clients, I would say, are just nutrition clients, and then they do their own training, their own movement, and the other 30% is kind of nutrition and training, or even just training on its own. But of course, we always see the most optimal results when people address both, because as you said, it's one thing leads to the other, and one thing helps the other in the sense of satiation, in the sense of body composition, in the sense of even just learning how to do hard things and how to embrace kind of delaying gratification, not just when it comes to nutrition, but also when it comes to training, and vice versa.
Mm. And something that actually goes in my mind whenever I speak about this conversation around food and exercising is the fact that the reason of a person's doing it. For example, most of the people that exercise because of the weight, exercise because they are unhappy with their lives, and exercise in terms of actually looking for love, or so love in a way of loving themselves, thinking that going to the gym is enough to actually love themselves. But towards that, let's say someone has heartbreak and their heart is totally destroyed, and they mix these two things, exercise and food. And definitely, as much as we want to actually create that balance, it goes back to that thing. One would actually be addicted to one thing, not two of them. Most of the time, most cases with food. So as a coach that's coaching people, how do you make sure that people don't fall into the trap of food addiction?
Yes, I love how you link that with just looking for love or self-love or whatever as well, because of course emotions play such a big role when it comes to food. We don't just eat for the reasons of hunger. If it was that easy, GLP-1 antagonizers or whatever would have resolved everything by now already also, and that's something we're going to get into later on. But for now, I think we don't just eat for hunger reasons. We also eat for social reasons, for often dealing with stress in a not such great way, or dealing with our emotions in not such a great way. So to answer your question with how I make sure people don't fall into the food trap. Well, so numerous things. Point number one, in my opinion, really is focusing more on the things that we should be including in our diet, and not so much thinking about what we shouldn't have and what we need to stay away from. Too many people are focused on, oh, I can't have that, I can't have this. And so they're really restrictive. And then at some point they snap and they want to have all the pizza, they want to have all the chips. And so by simply focusing in our day-to-day life more on, okay, I need to have more protein, I should have more vegetables, we're automatically more satiated if we focus on that. If we eat more of the good things, we're probably automatically eating less of the higher calorie things. And at the same time, practicing in a very moderate, kind of guided way how to have things in moderation. I truly like moderation is one of my favorite words alongside consistency, because I think that is something people struggle with. We have this all or nothing mentality. We think we're on our diet, we're off our diet. We can either have the whole pizza or we can have nothing at all. And so by practicing on a regular basis, maybe once a week you go out for date night with your partner and you say, hey, let's share the pizza, or you have 4 slices, I'll have 2 slices, and we can share a salad between us, and just be happy with moderation. Or something like dark chocolate. I personally love chocolate. So actually every day I allow myself to have like 4 little pieces of chocolate, because number one, it brings me so much joy. And number two, if I were to tell myself, Lisa, you can never ever have chocolate, at some point I would snap and I would eat 2 entire blocks all in one sitting, or maybe even more, and then feel gross about myself and whatever. And I don't want people to get to that place. I really, really want to teach people how to move away from this all or nothing thinking into more of a moderation, temperance sort of place. And I think that really, really helps not to fall into the food trap of overdoing it when you practice it on a regular basis, when you don't have that restriction of, oh, I can never have XYZ. And at the same time, if you just focus on having more of the good stuff, on being kinder to yourself in that way. And then of course we would also have to dig a little bit deeper into like what are we trying to soothe, and why are we trying to soothe through food? Is it every time that you're stressed from work? Is it every time that you have an argument with your partner? Is it because you never take time just for yourself and all you do is sacrifice your time for your family? So uncovering some of these layers and digging a little bit deeper, individualizing the approach can really, really help us determine how we can deal with that the best for that particular individual.
And something that really is important, that actually made me think about something. And actually, before you, and 2 hours ago, I had a guest where I would say it is almost the same conversation, but at the same time, it's not, because we're speaking about powerlifting, but now with you are speaking about weight loss. And one thing that he actually said, he spoke about prioritizing things, and also you spoke about sacrifice. And when when we prioritize things, we end up neglecting other things. For example, let's say I am prioritizing being healthy, and when you start being healthy, you are become another person of saying that I don't want to miss my meal, and I want to eat this and this and this and this. Having this whole diet, and this whole diet becomes your whole personality. That if I go to a certain place, there needs to be this and this and this and this. And to something else, you spoke about cheat days, whereas you eat that certain thing that it's out of the way. For example, I would say your chocolate, your pizza, because I remember I was actually again listening to a podcast by Lex. It's Lex Friedman, and where he interviewed Dr. Huberman, where they spoke about food in terms of going to different restaurants and actually trying new things, even though they are actually Dr. Huberman actually raised the fact that he was on a diet, but he was able to go out in a way of eating a different food. And I feel like there's this cult within that thing of actually realizing that of like I don't need to actually be in a way of I must stop the fact that I must not cheat on my meals, and I need to make sure on my exercises. And how do you make sure that you actually, when it comes to your clients, of actually reassuring them that a slice of pizza doesn't hurt? That's that that side of chocolate doesn't hurt. It's normal, and in a way of, yeah, how do you do that?
Yeah, great question. And I love, first of all, I love all the podcasts that you listen to. I'm a huge fan of the Diary of the CEO, Lex Friedman, and of course Huberman as well. And yeah, I mean, what you mentioned about priorities and how we can sometimes become too strict with certain things, that's a really good point. But more importantly, what you touched on in terms of personality, I think that's really, really interesting. So, I mean, for anybody who wants to lose weight, who wants to lose body fat in particular, I do think it is important to take on some of the personality traits and views in the sense of I am the person that exercises a few times per week. I am the person who also chooses the steak and the potatoes or the salad or whatever when eating out. I don't need to eat the deep fried things. It just helps us make decisions long term in a different way than if we just say, oh, I'm just on a diet, I can't have that right now, because that automatically puts a negative connotation onto the healthier way of eating, right? So if we identify as a quote unquote healthy person, that definitely helps us long term make the good decisions 80-90% of the time, which is what it comes down to. But then, okay, we do need to talk about these extra 10 or 20% of the time. And like you mentioned, Huberman and so on, I think he also shares every now and then he will have a glass of wine or whatever his choice of beverages, or every now and then he will have a croissant or something like that. And I think, again, the emphasis is on every now and then, because to me, what it comes down to is what we do on a daily basis. Those are the things that matter the most. And so if I look at a client's daily food intake or even their weekly food intake, and I can see that 80% of the time they are choosing whole foods, they're choosing vegetables and meat and fish and all these good things. And then I might hear in their voice, oh, I've really been craving this cake that my grandma used to make, or I would love to have, I kind of miss going to the movies with my family and having popcorn there. Then I'm like, oh, okay, well, great that you're mentioning this, because let's see how we can build that in on your Friday night. You are going for dinner with your family, and then afterwards you guys are going for popcorn at the movies. That is great. So how can we work that around your day? Maybe that might mean your breakfast is a little bit lighter that day because you're going to save a few more calories for the evening. Or maybe that might mean in your lunch, we're going to incorporate more protein and more vegetables, less of the carbohydrates, because you're going to save that for dinner. So it's all a matter of switching and flopping things, or essentially trading something in for something else, because everything is just in terms of your calorie budget. As long as that's fine, we're in a really great place. So if you say, okay, well, that party on Friday is going to be a little bit bigger, though I don't think that I can stay within my weight loss calories for that. Okay, that's fine. All we need to do is reduce a little bit more on the other days so that you can have more on the one day. But not, of course, in a healthy measure, because sometimes I see people, they over restrict in an extreme manner during the week just so that they can really overdo it on the weekend. And of course, that's not the point of the matter either. But to go back to your question, I really, really think that as long as we eat well 80-90% of the time and do our training 80-90% of the time, we can give and we should give ourselves some flexibility those other 10-20% of the time when we're on vacation, when we want to do something special. And for me, the emphasis is always on the experience behind something, because if someone just says, oh, I just want to binge eat on the couch at night watching Netflix on my own, that's probably not the best thing to encourage. Then I would say, again, I would ask a few questions. Like, why is that? Why is that? Maybe because you're feeling just a little bit lonely? Is that maybe because you had a stressful day and so on? But if someone just says, oh, I love to cook a 3-course meal for my husband and make an experience out of that, that is very different for me, because we can focus on the conversation. We can focus on the central experience as opposed to it just being about the food.
And something that you actually mentioned, calories, and something that is very important through our conversation, because I usually, as someone that is based on mental health, I believe that I listen too much on this side of fitness instead of the emotional side. I don't know why is that. And I'm not quite sure if you are aware of Dr. Mike Israel.
Israel, yes.
Rachel, yeah. I'm not quite sure if you're familiar with him, and
Sure.
usually listen to him. And I've listened to all of his episodes with Chris Williamson, Modern Wisdom, and also recently with Stephen Pallet. And he usually speaks about these things of calories. And at some point, we think that it's nothing. Nah, it's nothing. It's something that it's made for bodybuilders. And I've seen also in his videos, Chris Bumstead usually has that weight, or that thing of weighing calories in terms of he eats a certain calories at a certain day. So to someone that it's unfamiliar with the phrase calories, and how does it work? How does it benefit you in terms of eating a certain amount of calories?
Well, so I mean, first of all, I'm also a huge fan of Dr. Mike Israel, and I totally share his philosophy that he and his team at RP Strength, I think, are teaching. And essentially, I mean, the whole concept of calorie counting and macro counting is not just for bodybuilders, especially in the last 5 to 10 years. We've really seen a surge also amongst the general population, and with the increase of amazing apps like Macro Factor, like MyFitnessPal, etc., where you can track your food intake reasonably easily. I highly recommend doing that for a certain amount of time to anybody. And here is why. So essentially, calories is just a measure of energy. Anything that we eat contains calories, so contains energy, right? That's why gives us energy. That's why we either store it as body fat if we consume too much. That's why we potentially lose weight if we consume less energy than what our body is burning. So essentially, calories are just a measure of energy. Now, these calories can either come from carbohydrates, they can come from fats, or they can come from protein. So those are the three options. Technically, we also have the option of alcohol, but that's a different one. Our body can't really properly utilize that. So usually, almost all the food that we consume comes from one of those three. And carbs and protein, they have 4 calories per 1 gram. So 1 gram of protein has 4 calories. 1 gram of fat, however, has 9 calories. So just per gram, fats are a little bit more calorie dense. So why is that important? Well, for me, the importance, if someone just wants to lose weight, regardless of that's coming from muscle mass or body fat, all they really need to focus on is to consume less calories than what their body is burning. However, in my opinion, and also from what people like Dr. Mike Israel, et cetera, are preaching, it is very important to still pay attention to your protein intake. It's not so important to get very specific on the carb or fat distribution, but to consume enough protein means that we are very likely either holding on to more lean body mass or more of our muscle as we're dieting, and most of our lost weight comes from fat. Otherwise, as I said, the chances are just higher that we're going to lose body fat and muscle mass. And of course, we don't want that. We don't want to look skinny fat at the end of our diet. That is one of the reasons why Chris Bumstead makes sure he's getting a sufficient amount of protein, even in his prep phase, in order for his body to hold on to as much of the muscle mass that he has built in his off phase as possible. So that would be something I would honestly recommend to anybody. And of course, it seems tedious in the beginning to record your food intake, to keep a food diary, so to speak. But number one, you get faster at it with time. The most annoying or tedious thing is really the first few days, because you need to search for all the foods that you usually eat. And then, of course, you need to weigh out your food as well. But you get better at it. You get quicker at it. And the truth is, most of us eat similar things most of the time. Not all the time, but you might have 2 or 3 different breakfast options. You might have 2 or 3 different lunch options and similar snacks, and maybe just dinner being a little bit more of a variety, I guess. When I first started tracking my food and looking at my calorie intake, I was surprised, and most of the clients that I work with that start with tracking are in the same boat. So I thought I was eating a diet high in protein. Well, when I was tracking my food for the first few weeks, I realized, okay, I'm nowhere near the numbers I thought that I was. I thought 1 or 2 eggs in my lunch, that's enough protein for that meal. Well, it's still a very low amount of protein. I thought I was eating healthy, as I shared with you, paleo diet super well. And I realized that all the fats were adding up so easily. I was just drizzling olive oil over everything and seeds and cheese. And I realized, okay, wow, I'm actually not eating as little as I thought I was. No wonder I'm not losing any body fat. And so for many people, they have similar experiences when for the first time they weigh out peanut butter and they're like, oh, holy crap, I didn't know that these 2 tablespoons of peanut butter have 250 calories. That's almost, half a meal for some people. So it's just very educational, and it doesn't mean that you have to do it for the rest of your life. But if you, the listener, is thinking, I would like to lose some body fat, I don't actually know how many calories I'm eating, I can only encourage you to download something like MyFitnessPal or like Chronometer or My Macros or Macro Factor, or there is a ton of different apps. They all essentially do the same thing. And just weigh out your food for a few weeks simply to see how many calories you are consuming. And then, of course, there's a number of formulas out there or online calorie macro calculator where you can type in your height, your age, your activity level, and they give you a calorie target for your goal. Mind you, that is not always very accurate. They don't take into consideration your dieting history. They don't take into consideration if you want to have slightly higher calories on the weekend or not. That's where the beauty of having an actual coach does come in. But generally speaking, still starting to track on your own is a really, really great place to begin with.
Mm, mm, mm. It's a lot that you touched on. Definitely all of it very important, and especially in terms of breakfast. And some people have this perception that, actually, let me not say a lot of people. Some of the colleagues that I know actually do that. Actually, don't eat in the morning and only eat usually at lunch, and definitely at dinner, and those 2 times eat 2 times a day, or even within between lunch and supper or dinner, they actually eat in between. And myself is part of those people actually not really not having a sense of what should I eat. Sometimes in a way of, sometimes I usually test myself and want to see myself, what time will I get hungry again? And it really fascinates me, and because after 2 or 3 hours I become hungry and realize, the flip, I should have eaten, but try by any means to wait for lunch. And it's something that I believe most people do actually, I would say, starve themselves, and especially when it comes to food addiction. And for a person to actually get rid of that food addiction, one believes that they need to starve themselves, because if they don't eat, they don't actually accumulate that type of weight, having that sense of body dysmorphia, or something that is big, especially in the fitness industry. As much as you are lifting weights, as much as you are doing your diets, you are reaching your goals, but when you are unhappy with your weight, with your weight and the way you look, you realize, flip, I've done this for nothing. And I recently, actually, not, let me say recently, I think it was last month, when I saw this guy on YouTube. I forgot his name. I think it's Jeff. where he was interviewing bodybuilders on body dysmorphia, only to find out all of those people actually face this body dysmorphia. I don't know if I mentioned this, but so the reason, but people have different actually I mentioned it, have different reasons when it comes to lifting weights, when it comes to taking care of themselves. They want that sense of love. Actually, now I'm better. Now people will love me. Not knowing that on that that love only works on within you in order for you to actually reach that sense of self-acceptance. You must first love yourself. Something that I myself learned the hard way, not through gymming, definitely going to the gym and lifting weights and eating healthier. And yeah, I just wanted to say that in a way because I want to drive this conversation to Ozempic. As much as Ozempic is a drug for diabetes, but somehow it has found itself used by people that have weight problems, which is obesity. And I don't know about Jimmy in Colombia. I don't know about Jimmy, but I clearly know that both in the United Kingdom and in the United States of America, it has a big problem because one thing Johan Harry actually mentioned. Are you aware of him?
With who, sorry?
Johan Harry.
Yes, I've heard of him. Yes. Mhm.
Yeah. He spoke on that. Actually, he tested it on himself and realized that there are so many side effects that actually bad for us, and whereas we use the drug of the Ozempic, and in United Kingdom is easily accessible and but in the US definitely expensive because of the how in a way of I think they have problem with stock when it comes to Ozempic. So before we get into deeply, what are your thoughts on Ozempic when it comes to weight loss?
I just wanted to say like one more thing on what you mentioned before, which I thought was just so beautiful, Asekho. It was in regards to starving ourselves all day long. For me, I think that's a really, really important point because I too know many people or many of the clients that come to us, they actually over restrict throughout the day, and then that's when they fall into their binges in the evening. And so I guess just on that note, again, thinking more about what to have more of and what to be more consistent with. And that would be, allowing yourself to have a proper lunch and a proper lunch break, and allowing yourself to have an afternoon snack, and then coming home not being quite as ravenous and not eating anything that's inside, as opposed to those people that skip their lunch break and then just have a coffee and a muffin in the afternoon. And then you're so hungry when you come home. And I think that that's really one of the dangerous parts. But no, I just wanted to finish off with that, but I think your question is brilliant in regards to Ozempic. And I have to say that at first, when it became more mainstream and popular, I don't want to say 100% against it, but I immediately, it brought up the stimulus in me, and like, oh, that's just the lazy option. That's just the easy way out. That's just for people that don't want to put in the effort. And then I learned more about it, and I started to open my mind more towards it. And I think that for some people, it can be a life-saving gateway to a healthier life overall. I think in all cases, no matter what, it should come hand in hand with lifestyle changes. It should come hand in hand with education on actually food quality, and of course on training and physical activity as well. I think the dangers where I really see it is where people indeed are only using it as almost an excuse of I can still eat crap, and I still can just keep going with my current or my previous lifestyle. I do think where the benefits come in are simply because of what I was saying earlier in terms of hunger. We do know that people that have obesity, they don't, excuse me, they don't have the same satiation signals. They don't feel satiety in the same way that
So,
in the same way that someone with a healthy body fat level might. Excuse me. And therefore, these drugs can come in handy simply in regulating appetite a lot better, and simply in the sense of blunting the food noise is what they call it, right? If you constantly, day in, day out, all you can think about is your next meal, all you can think about is eating more. And so if you take a drug that helps you let go of these thoughts, and suddenly maybe you're not craving the hamburger with the 2 bowls of fries and you're just happy with a bowl of salad, maybe that can make long-term changes also. But I think, as I said, in all cases, in my opinion, it has to come in with the right dosage and overview of a medical professional, and at the same time, ideally with a therapist, so that they can help you transition out of it eventually. I don't think it should be a long-term solution, and I do think that there are some dangers in just giving people a drug and letting them walk away with that, essentially.
and you really spoke a lot on Ozempic and the lifestyle, and I saw something on Reddit saying that, as I actually agree with what you just said in terms of people looking for an excuse to actually eat prep food, and in terms of not changing that lifestyle. And I want to bring attention to something that Johan Harris said on the podcast with Stephen Ballet, where he said that when a person stops taking Ozempic, he gains back 70% of their weight. And it's quite alarming, because as much as Ozempic is on the rise, it will come a point that people will stop using it, thinking that they can survive without it. And that would lead to obesity, firstly. Secondly, it would lead to mental health problems. People not actually having the confidence within themselves. People have that sense of not loving themselves. That would lead to a more higher suicide rates. And it's quite, to me, it's quite alarming, because as someone that is really, really cares about mental health, someone that is really first, it actually wants to actually put the word out about mental health, that in terms of assisting people when it comes to that. So to me, it's quite very alarming, and I find myself thinking, why are people actually taking this? And another danger, apart from obesity, is the fact that people that actually need those Ozempic or those dosages, which people with diabetes, they won't be able to access them because of people that actually want to use them for weight. So it's quite a conversation that I believe that this is not a space to actually speak about that when it comes to people with diabetes. But I just wanted to actually, people that might be aware, why would you say that in terms of mentioning diabetes? Because I feel like it's an important thing that I believe that we should actually include to our conversation. So yeah, and when it comes to weight, again, it's definitely something to do with self-esteem. And as much as Chris Bumstead says that self-confidence is being yourself, and being ourselves in Ozempic is very different, because it also has a change in a way of how you take care of yourself. And also, Stephen Ballet actually made an example, because one of his friends takes it, billionaire, he takes it the Ozempic. Whenever they go to the gym, they can't even lift weights. and it actually disregards that fact of, firstly, the nutrition that we've been talking about the whole podcast. Secondly, doing the hard thing, lifting weights, and actually knowing that pain of actually lifting weights and when you are tired and push yourself beyond limits. So yeah, and do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think the 75% of the people that gain the weight back, or maybe even more, exactly for the reasons that you're saying, because they lose the weight so quickly, so their identity, their habits don't catch up with them, and they're still continuing the same lifestyle, thinking that it's just the drug that's helping them. So I do think without an intervention when it comes to personality or when it comes to habits, certainly we won't see any lasting positive effects of the drug.
Definitely. And I'm quite seeing the time. We are almost of time. And before I let you go, do you have what would you like to? What kind of message would you want the audience to take from our conversation today?
Yeah, a beautiful question. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's been a true pleasure connecting with you. And I guess to bring it back to some of the things that I said earlier, I would encourage people to, number one, think more about what they should have more of. So more protein, more fiber, more vegetables. Number two, thinking more about moderation and temperance rather than living in all or nothing extremes. And number three, giving tracking a go. Honestly, recording your calorie intake for some time, it can be so eye-opening, so educational, even if it seems tedious at first, but it's a really beautiful tool. So that would be three things I would like to encourage the listener to.
Thank you so much for that. And I believe that will actually, in a way, of open a different perspective towards the audience, and definitely most people would like to be interested of saying that in terms of want to hear more of your work, and definitely want to actually read more about your work. Where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram most active. My handle there is Nutrition Coaching and Life. This is the same for the website, nutritioncoachingandlife.com. My podcast is called the Nutrition and Life Podcast. But yeah, happy to connect with anyone. Please reach out, even just letting me know how you like this episode.